Hola, my name is Luis. My pronouns are he, him, and for my fellow Spanish speakers, él. I'm a proudly out entrepreneur, and I'm happy to be here today.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So on today's show, we have Luis Báez. And Luis, where are you joining us from today?
I'm presently in Sacramento, California, Northern California.
Very cool. Very cool. So you're not too far from Portland, Oregon. So
Not
welcome.
at all.
So amazing having you here. I'm
Thank
looking forward
you.
I'm looking forward to talking a lot about you and your business. And for anyone who's not familiar with Luis, he is a business strategist serving entrepreneurs, service providers, and course creators with a particular dedication to empowering underrepresented entrepreneurs through his training and coaching. He teaches online business owners how to scale their revenues and impact by creating and selling high-end offers, including coaching, masterminds, and memberships. With over 14 years of experience in sales and marketing for companies including LinkedIn, Google, Uber, and Tesla, Luis brings a breadth of knowledge and experience that spans across digital advertising, software as a service, and sustainability with a revenue impact of over $500 million to date. Okay, so this is going to be an awesome interview. Just kind of reading through your bio, there's so many questions that I have, probably wondering kind of the missteps that I've made when I was building my own business in the early days. I guess like my first question for you, Luis, is, just kind of going back and thinking of your younger self, what's kind of your origin story to entrepreneurship and how did you land on the business that you have today?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Rhodes. And thank you so much for this opportunity to connect with you and with your audience. I'm so thrilled that this podcast exists. My younger self, just to set the context, grew up in the South Bronx during the 80s and 90s. I grew up in poverty in public housing, went to public school, hung out at the public library to stay away from all the bullies who picked on me for being the little gay boy in the projects. And so, my worldview being first generation, and sort of what it meant to be successful was you're either a doctor, a lawyer, or a business person. And that's always stayed with me, not in terms of how I value other people's, professionalism or value that they bring to the table, but that's what informed my path. I went to school being the first in my family to have a high school diploma, the first to go to college. And right out of college, I was really determined to be for going into college, I wanted to be the doctor. So I was pre-med and I took all the courses and did all the labs and hated it. I was unhappy. And I listened to that. That was something that was very important. Whenever I just am coming up against something that just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel authentic, and doesn't fulfill me, I pivot. Even if it's painful, I pivot. And so I pivoted from doing the doctor thing. So check that off the list. Next is the lawyer. Out of college, I did the legal thing, was a paralegal. I was an assistant to a judge who was the first woman, first Latina appointed and elected to her bench. And it was amazing. I did the law school thing for a semester, part-time, while working full-time in the courts. And I hated it. I was miserable. So the doctor thing, cross it off the list. The lawyer thing, cross it off the list. And now it's time for the business thing. So after dropping out of law school, I pivoted into sales and marketing. Really by chance. I had a friend who was working at WebMD and invited me to interview. I had no marketing, no advertising, no sales experience. And I walked into it not really knowing much about the business, but I knew that there was this promise of working in tech or working in an online business and being able to show up as my whole self, as an openly gay man, as a Puerto Rican, as an urban person, all these things, all these intersections, right, were welcomed in that environment, or so I perceived. And so coming out of the legal background, which was super conservative, where I had to really have, my guard on, I jumped into business, and particularly in this industry with that expectation, like there is going to be space for me. There's going to be space for me to succeed and thrive and be open and out. And so I ended up getting this job at WebMD. Fast forward to my second job in advertising. I was at the British Broadcasting Corporation. I worked for the BBC in their North American headquarters. And then I met a juncture where I was either going to continue with the team or move on. And that's when I made the leap to California. on a whim. I showed up here. I knew exactly 5 people. I can count all the people I knew in the Bay Area with one hand. And I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. I had less than $10,000 cash in my pocket. Tell me if you've heard this story, because this is like everyone who shows up in California or on the West Coast, right? They skin to the wind and show up here and just make things happen. And so I did. And that's when I ended up getting recruited for LinkedIn and Google and Uber and Tesla. The rest is history. But the way that I arrived at entrepreneurship, Rhodes, was really after arriving in this industry that promised that I could be my whole self at work and thrive and have, just an equal chance as anyone else to really stand out. And I was just really, really disappointed at the resistance that I met, the discrimination that I experienced, and just feeling really gutted by my time in Silicon Valley. And so entrepreneurship for me was accidental, because I was looking for a way to bring my whole self into what I did and not be, subjected to climbing the ladder and never knowing what I'd see at the end of that corporate ladder or ever reach the top, if ever. Right. So rather than spending years trying to prove myself to a group that didn't appreciate me, I pivoted and I sat at the very top of my own ladder as the CEO of my own business now.
Yes. That I love. Well, I like where you are now. And it's such a powerful story in terms of what I really love is you knowing exactly the kind of feeling that you wanted to have in the work that you're doing in the world, whether that was being a doctor or being a lawyer or going to work for a big corporation in Silicon Valley, which you would think, right? Like on the surface, tech, reinventing everything. And yet kind of succumbing to the status quo and kind of the dominant culture of the way business is supposed to be. But if you make your own business, you get to kind of, as much as you want, create the rules of your culture, and
absolutely.
That's what you're doing, I mean, like in thinking about being a strategist, kind of helping people like align with what it is that lights them up, you're modeling that. And I guess like my next question for you is just thinking about the audience that you focus on, which is specifically coaches, creators, and consultants, maybe similar to you, having that path of, I've worked for someone else and, I thought I could climb that ladder. And if I just kind of stuff myself into a box and fit in like everybody else, I'll get to that end goal. And, maybe kind of realizing similar to you, just like, maybe I don't want to spend the next 30 years, like you said, trying to prove myself. So do you see kind of like a similar alliance with the folks that you work with and in similar experience that way? Yeah.
100%, and I'm very intentional about where I show up and how I show up. And when I'm looking to build these relationships with these coaches and creators and consultants, I'm very keen on the fact that we have, our entire economy and society and expectations and notions of success have shifted. And we're in a position now, given everything now in the pandemic and how we've seen that people have been able to thrive and function. And we've also just seen, so many opportunities and technologies emerge where people are now in a position to be their own bosses and continue to live a livable way for themselves, leveraging their expertise and doing the things that they love. I focus on serving minority entrepreneurs. So I work with women, I work with folks who are LGBTQIA, I work with folks who are, BIPOC, and that's very intentional because when I think about what it meant to participate in capitalism and what it meant to build generational wealth, it used to be, you would get the degree, you would, get the job, and then you would invest in real estate. Maybe you dip and dabble in stocks or something like that. But when we talk about like, what are the pillars of personal wealth, of financial foundations and financial health, it meant having some kind of entryway into property ownership, right? Real estate, some ownership of property. When we talk about what it means to start an online business and what it means to leverage your expertise, we're talking about the realm of intellectual property. And we're talking about an opportunity for someone with no generational wealth who's worked very hard on themselves and, have demonstrated their passion and really worked really hard to up-level their expertise. They now have an opportunity to participate in capitalism and start building generational wealth through the creation and protection of intellectual property. And so when I enter conversations with folks and when I connect with folks, I really hone in on, hey, you matter. First and foremost, we got to go through a mindset shift of like, can I do this? Will anyone listen? Is this a viable option and opportunity for me? 100%. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry now, right? That everyone's very aware of. And there's a market that's all the way primed. So that beyond that, we then have to get into the strategy. How does this come together, right? Once people are illuminated to the opportunity of like, oh, I can live life on my terms. I can be out and do my thing and serve people and make an impact and make revenue. Check, 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 check. How does this come together? Because I see other people walking the walk, but they don't all look like me. That's the thing that I really grappled with when I entered into the online business realm. It's like, I don't know where my folks are, and I'm still out here looking for them. That's why I was so excited to connect with you, Rhodes. And I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing with this podcast, because there's visibility that I needed and I wish I had earlier on in my opportunity, in my process, right? So that's really why I'm out here. I want folks to know it is possible. We can all participate and do good work authentically and ethically, make an impact and not be starving and not be worried about making these bills.
Yes.
And not be subjected to the discrimination also of that traditional corporate ladder experience.
Yes. I had goosebumps when you were talking, and just kind of speaking to, when you're looking out at the landscape of whether it's working for someone else or starting your own business, thinking to yourself, I see people doing this, and you said, and they don't look like me, right?
Yeah.
So just the power of representation, seeing it to be it. And, in the world of kind of LGBT communities, the expansive world that we're in, right? It's still, I want to see, for myself, I want to see other trans, non-binary business owners out there kicking butt, and we are out there, right? But it's
100%.
Yeah, right. Like, where do we find each other? And so you're, just by kind of you being kind of hanging the shingle that you did, building the business that you're building now, the impact that you're having, you don't even know, right? Like, in so many ways, there's younger people that align with you, and for all of the different reasons, they see part of themselves in you. I don't know, maybe 30 years from now, someone will, many people will come forward to be like, because you were on this podcast or because you were out doing what you're doing, this inspired me, right?
That is certainly the hope, Rhodes. Yeah, from your lips all the way out there, because that's really what this is about. This is about, making sure that the next generation of folks can carry the torch. Yeah. And it's so interesting you mentioned, because I am inspired by the people in my network as I see them going out and pursuing things, and I'll reach out to them and congratulate them on their milestones. And they give me the feedback of like, man, you inspired me because you were out here before I ever started. Like, and you don't know. You just don't know when you walk in truth and when you walk with purpose. You just don't know the kind of impact that you make. And that's what brings me to conversations like these today. Yes, I want to be able to reach more and more people. I really want to expand and elevate this experience for more people.
Yes. Well, no doubt you're doing that. And
thank you.
So before we go kind of expansive and talking about community, I want to stick with your business for a few more questions. And I guess the first is, you started out to kind of work with coaches, creators, and consultants. So I'm wondering, what are kind of like 2 or 3 of the common challenges that you saw within this group of business owners? Let's start there, and then I have a few other.
Of course. Common challenges. Number one, I love what I do. I love it so much I don't feel like I should charge for it. I think it's a crime to charge too much. I work with folks who are creatives, who are empaths. They are life coaches, photographers. They are consultants, social media consultants. They are just folks who love what they do and love the people that they serve. And so because they walk with purpose and because they show up the way that they do, there's this really icky relationship with money. Or charging for what they do. So that's one thing. So we got to get over that. And then once we move past that, then there's the hurdle of charging what you're worth, or even identifying what your value is. And that's so deeply personal, right? It requires some space and some time. I can give someone, a checklist to go down the line of questions and things to explore. Ultimately, I end up having a conversation with folks where it's like, yeah, you showing up, for interviews, you showing up and doing the things you did in your community, being mentioned in this publication, being invited to speak on the stage, the fact that you wrote this little ebook on the side or whatever, all of that cumulatively, if we put that together and package it, that is all your value stacked up. And that's how we need to proceed when we think about you showing up, offering all that love and all that expertise, and still making your bills and still feeling like a successful entrepreneur running a real business that's actually headed somewhere, so that you don't meet those questions of, hey, how's your business doing? And you get that like sinking feeling in your stomach.
Yes.
Right. And then beyond the sort of like, hey, people want this, and hey, I'm valuable and worthy, right? Then we got to get into sort of the tactical and strategic things. Okay, so how do I move away from charging, $100 an hour a session to making these sustainable revenues that put me in a position to then invest in growing in the business, right? A lot of these folks, coaches, creators, and consultants, they pay with sweat equity up front. You're serving clients one-on-one. And the minute you've got your process dialed in, the minute that you have a framework that is repeatable for getting those results over and over, that's when we start to shift the conversation and say, hey, your revenues are predictable. Let's take a slice of this money. And this is where we start to move into developing group coaching experiences, or masterminds and memberships, or online courses where people can self-serve if that's something that is more of an opportunity for them than working with you one-on-one, right? So we start to think, how can we take what you do and replicate, that knowledge and that framework in different formats so that people have an opportunity to learn from you in whatever way they prefer to learn.
Yes. So you answered my next question, which is, but I want to dive a little bit deeper around memberships, mastermind, and coaching, like to build up to scale. And before going there, I just want to like highlight something that you responded to a little bit earlier, which is this kind of concept of building generational wealth, or just building wealth for yourself, and kind of looking at the old models of, physical things like purchasing property, or buying stocks, which are all there and available, right? And kind of shifting into, if it's just you and you're blending your skills, really looking at the body of work you're creating as intellectual property, and that is in and of itself building wealth for you, whether you can see that right now or not. And I think that leads into kind of diving a little bit deeper into this, kind of coaching model, or, proprietary, I don't know, membership model or mastermind. So how do you help your clients make that mindset shift, right? Where you're, instead of like trading time for money, which is probably what you see a lot of folks kind of in these spaces do, to kind of move into this new mindset? Like, how do you get them to have those aha moments of like, you're already doing this, and there's something so much bigger, How do you coach people around that?
Yeah. Number one, we take a moment and we assess, like, you love what you do, and you love the people that you serve, but like, let's talk about the things you really don't like. Let's talk about the hours that you're putting in. Let's talk about those disappointing and feelings when you've discounted your rates or discounted your package for someone and they don't appreciate the work that you're doing for them, right? Because there's a lot of resentment that starts to build up and sort of become infused into a collaboration. So I spend a moment really punctuating, like, hey, like, let's look at what you've got going on. Let's really talk about the monsters in the closet, so to speak, and the things that are actually keeping you up at night. And let's look at what the alternative reality could look like, and what it looks like to streamline some of these things. And so the next step is, everyone that I work with at the beginning, they come to me because they're like, Luis, you're the salesperson, you're the chief revenue officer of my business. I advise, I trust your advice and all these things, but I hate the numbers. I hate the spreadsheets. I hate the reports and the analytics and the data. These things give me the heebie-jeebies, right? So I have to step in and really simplify that and make it, really streamlined and digestible and easy for my clients to understand. This is how we start to move things for you, because you can get really burnt out if the only thing that you're doing is offering one-on-one services, and you're not doing it necessarily at a premium beyond your first or second year in business, right? You've got to be growing, and that includes growing your rates and your revenues. And relative to the question about like in creating intellectual property and, that mindset shift, yeah, I think a lot of folks, when I introduce this concept to them of, your ideas are worth money, your ideas are valuable to someone else who's just two steps behind you, or they're really valuable to the person like me that never saw themselves in another business owner, and found that one person who's doing the thing. There's enormous value in just showing up. And so you want to make sure that you honor your energy, your time, your worth, your expertise. And I think that once I introduce this concept of like, hey, once you create this one thing and you get it dialed in and you start to scale it, operationalize it, throw it into the website machine, as some people like to call it, then all of a sudden, things start to change. And borrowing from my background, right? As much as like I've mentioned, my experience in Silicon Valley inspired me to go down this path of entrepreneurship. I can't deny that it influenced who I am or the way that I think. And so I am like really trained and conditioned to do, the one thing, create leverage to create one asset or one process that then can be scalable globally, to other people. And so that's just the way that I think. And so when I bring that kind of thinking to smaller businesses and I introduce this concept of like, I even compare it to like the music industry. Your online course is like your EP. If I were an artist, I had my EP out here, I'd be singing wherever I can, showing up at every venue, event, or whatever, wherever I have an audience. So once you get your online course, once you get your group coaching experience, once you get your mastermind dialed in, that's your EP. You are out here and you have everything you need to make the money.
Yes, I love that. And well, one, it's just kind of that whatever your EP, your online course, like your intellectual property, it's like it's finishing one course until successful, right? So it's really, as you said, taking the thing that you do really well, dialing it in, and not that it's perfect, let go of that, right? But just getting it to a place where you can bring it to market. And in an online world, it's amazing. People, you can find an audience that resonates with your message and quickly test, like, is there something to this or not? So it's kind of a great kind of democratic way of testing a really good idea, right? So I think like my next question for you is just knowing what you do as a sales and business coach. What's kind of for the businesses that you work with, like at what level of maturity is that business? Like when is it right to work with a business and sales coach? And what does that look like for people who've never done that before?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Rhodes. I think that the minute that you can afford to get help in any aspect of your business, you should. The minute that you've got the $1,000 to hire the coach, the minute that you've got the $500 to start running the Facebook ads, the minute you've got the $1,000 for the virtual assistant, whatever capacity that kind of help looks like for you, that's when you start to invest. And if you are struggling with taking your vision and translating it to other people so that they understand what your vision is, they understand what it is that you do and how it comes together, what they get for the effort that you make, the investment that they make, and ultimately, what the future state looks like. Until you get clear, what that transformation is for the customer, I think that you do need support. And there are books and there are resources and things you can certainly turn to, but I think that talking it out with the person who's ahead of you is so powerful. And, we can think about several opportunities I already named. Like, yes, you can work with people one-on-one. If that's something that's not at your price point or within your budget, look at the group coaching opportunities. Look at the opportunity to not only learn from the person that you admire, who you trust to be your mentor, your coach, and your guide in this process, but also leverage the opportunity to network with like-minded people who are also doing the damn thing just like you and can talk about what it's like to be in the trenches and help you not feel a little crazy at times when you're out here. Because entrepreneurship, as you know, Rhodes, it can get very lonely. And really your ideas, if you work within the silo of your own mind and your own space, your ideas won't thrive. They won't. And so think about the opportunity to leverage all these different formats that these coaches now offer to reach them or reach their knowledge and start applying that. And I would say for someone that's just getting started, networking is the most important thing. If you're not ready to work with one person, think about getting into their group and think about, networking, connecting with those folks, sharing your work with them, offering your expertise to them in very authentic and genuine ways. Because that's what I teach, right? What I teach is, how do I show up in my business, not being that like sleazy, slimy salesperson that we all have an image of in our mind. Some people think of the car salesperson. Some people think of, the life insurance person. I get so many, when I ask the question, like, what's the image that pops up in your head, when you think about a salesperson? Everyone comes to it from different lived experiences, but the common theme is connecting with someone that's too pushy, who doesn't sound real, who doesn't actually care about, the situation I'm in, and is just worried about themselves and their commissions and their profits, etc. Right. And so I have to really break that mold for people and say, yeah, the way that we do business online these days, especially in the midst of this pandemic, is to be personable, relatable, authentic. Even bigger brands are grappling with this. How do we break the mold of being this Fortune 500, voice to being a voice that's more relatable, right? Especially with everything that's gone down. Even big companies have given into this notion of like authenticity sells. And so when I tell people, like, you don't need to be the sleazy person, you don't need to be so uptight or scripted or aggressive or hyper capitalistic, or in some instances hyper masculine, right? Like that's the image and the energy that people associate with sales. And the way that I also try to show up is being myself, right? The part of being an out entrepreneur is saying to folks like, yo, I am not this sharky, corporate, sleazy salesperson. I actually have a story that falls way outside of that mold. And let me tell you how I was able to still find success in my difference.
Yes. Yes. And that's one of the things when I was on your website, I loved you talking about your superpowers and being these superpowers that are kind of, I don't know, maybe the opposite of what some of us think about the average salesperson, which is being an introvert. Yay, introverts, that's
Yay.
me.
Yes.
And also like non-salesy. You're like the
Yeah.
non-salesy sales coach, right? And so, which I appreciate, right? Because you're kind of going at the speed of trust, of building relationships, which is a big element of sales. And so it makes me wonder, when you zoom out and you think of your lived experiences and the things that have shaped who you are, in particular, in the context of being a part of the LGBT community, what are some of those lived experiences that you have, growing up, as you talked about, being a young gay kid, hanging out in the library to avoid bullies in the Bronx, right? Kind of what are some of those superpowers that you see right now allow you to stand out in the business that you're doing?
Absolutely. I think it's just knowing what it means to be oppressed, knowing what it means to be othered, to be diminished, to be dismissed, disrespected, discriminated against. I can empathize with people on that level. And I think that, when you talk about, my approach to sales, and you talked about the language on my website, I think that people are very just refreshed to speak to a real person who opens the conversation with a question and actually listens before going into like sales, details, right? And that's because my entire life, I had to advocate for myself. I had to find ways of connecting with people that fell outside of, these like hyper masculine molds, and connect with them just being myself. Like I couldn't help who I was, and I didn't want to. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I thought there was something wrong with the people around me. They just didn't see the world the way that I did, right? They're thinking that I'm the problem. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's like, I have something to offer, and you're trying to like hurt me, diminish me, etc. But you're doing yourself a disservice and everyone around you, right? So, and I say that, and I know I sound a little cocky, but I have done a lot of work on myself in the process of really claiming what my worth and my self-worth and my value and my self-esteem and all these things, in the face of people wanting to hurt me physically, socially, etc. And And what I bring to the table is just the rawness about that, the realness about that. I think so many people, when you think about like the traditional like sales coach or business consultant and the way they position themselves, they get very much into like really high level language, deliverables and expectations and return on investment and blah. That's not how I start the conversation. I start the conversation with what brought you here in the first place, and tell me about like what's really keeping you stuck. Because I know that you've invested in some things. Tell me what's not working, right? Like, I don't start conversations talking about myself because I've made the effort to tell my story on the website, and I know that people have already checked that out before they connect with me. So I start the conversation with my client at the very center because they're the hero. That's the thing, is I'm not the hero. Like I love what I do, and I show up because I love what I do and the people that I serve, but they're the heroes. I don't do the work out of intention of like being, a money grabbing, kind of machine. No, I do the work because I want other people to serve the communities that I come from in really good ways. We deserve white glove experience, best in class customer service, etc. And if these other corporations ain't going to give it to us, then we can do that ourselves for ourselves, for sure.
Yes, yes. So much of what you share really resonates with me, starting with just like, as you said, understanding what it feels like to be oppressed, to be different, to be othered. It's those appreciation of differences that give you spades of empathy, right? Like it's just something that is natural to you. And in the work that you do, building relationship, building connections, and using that superpower of empathy probably builds trust so quickly with people that just Google search sales coach and they like find your webpage. But there's so much of you that's on your site that it's just, I have a good feel. Like before we had this conversation, this is the first time we were meeting. It's like, oh, I feel connected. I feel like you're speaking to things I can relate to as a business owner, and that's hard to do. And it seems so seamless, the way that you're able to kind of flex that superpower in this way. So I appreciate that. I think you're modeling, just a good way to be human in the world we find ourselves in right now.
Thank you. That's exactly what this comes down to. We are humans out here for other humans.
Yeah. And I think like with the sales piece too, like I also appreciated what you said about doing work on yourself, right? And we know just being on this planet, it's developmental, we kind of, we kind of overcome the challenges before us. We learn some lessons, we up level, and we keep that process going. And so I'm wondering, when you're working with people around sales and money, I feel like so much of your work is kind of stepping in the realm. I mean, you're a coach, not a therapist, right? But there's some kind of like money therapy, but it goes back to kind of maybe wounds or painful lessons that people have experienced with money. So in part of the work that you do, is there some developmental piece that you start off with your clients that helps them, aside from the immediate challenges at hand, helps them kind of take a deeper look at themselves and how they're showing up in their businesses?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm trying to think of like a recent collaboration of mine where I was connecting with someone who like, we're in the middle of a conversation where, up until that point, I've gotten really positive feedback. We're aligned. There's understanding. I'm guiding this person through that assessment that I told you about. Like, we're going to do inventory of everything you bring to the table, everything you've accomplished, and let's start evaluating your time differently. And that's when she interrupted and said, Luis, like, as a woman, as a minority, as a brown woman, I have just been conditioned, to always expect that I'm being underpaid, undervalued, and not, always accepted the way that I, show up in the way that I do things. And I really had to just have a moment with her and just say, like, look at where you're headed, right? You're no longer playing the game of impressing anyone. You are at the top of the ladder. You are now playing a game where people need to impress you. Right. And that's a very different ball game when you're entering into business. And when you go through that sort of like approach of like, oh, I'm a business owner, I'm a creator, a visionary, I create products and services, I generate jobs, I represent people that otherwise weren't represented. Like when all of a sudden they start to kind of like awaken that inner divinity, as I like to call it. Like, I think we all have a superpower that we just, systematically have been told we don't have.
Yeah.
And the cat is out the bag. If it didn't come out, in the 1960s for you, it's definitely out now, 2020. And not everyone starts the race at the starting line. Some of us have to really play catch up to even get to that starting line.
Yes.
Right. And so I have to remind people, like, you as a boss automatically start at that line, right? You're no longer playing this game over here of climbing the ladder, impressing people, getting buy-in, getting alliances, getting approval, getting recognition, promotions, bonuses, etc. That's no longer your game. Your game is your impact. It's the feedback you get from people that say, I am so thankful that you even exist, because I've been out here all by myself trying to figure out this problem by myself. Right. And so when I start to, have these conversations, I had this conversation with my client, and she had a moment. We cried it out. Like the work that I do, you were talking about, like, oh, it's money therapy. It is to a certain level, because we have to undo some of this work. So we have to undo some of these ways of thinking, of otherness, of not worthiness, of, undervaluedness. We have to overcome some of that. And we have to really look at ourselves as bosses. We're bosses now. And we're not good, people. We're not good students. We're not good employees. We're at the top now. We're sitting at the top of the ladder going, who's coming up with me?
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to the stories that we tell ourselves, and maybe, as you said, kind of deconditioning whatever labels or the ways that other people have maybe told your story about the work that you've done in the past versus how you're showing up now, manifesting the business that you want to have. And what's the story of your future? And why not start claiming that story now by speaking?
Yeah.
And even if it feels weird to say, I'm the CEO of my business. I mean, I know the first time I said that, I was like, whoa, that's different. That's a new title, right? But you grow into it. You grow into it when you speak it and you're doing it. And I mean,
and you show up differently. One of my biggest mentors in the game looked at me one day and said, Luis, like, how would you show up if you had everything you needed and you were already the best at what you did, right? Like, what if this wasn't a game of like proving yourself or stacking credentials or getting featured in Forbes and Entrepreneur and all these things? What if you being in your lane and doing the things that you already do was already great? How would that change the way that you show up? You wouldn't be, delaying launches or delaying projects or anything like that because you've got to catch up or get something or develop an experience or something. No, you just show up and just do the thing. And you get the feedback along the way, and you improve and you reiterate. And I think that that's really important too. I remind people, like, consumers are conditioned to be very forgiving. They're pre-sold into things. So they buy things that don't exist yet. Right. So when I try to like explain to people, like, you should be thinking about pre-selling your programs, they're like, why would I do that? Well, you bought that last album on pre-sale, or you bought the PlayStation on pre-sale. This happens all the time. Why wouldn't somebody do that with you?
Yes.
Right. So you get that validation, that feedback along the way. Then you launch, and you launch at, a lower price than maybe you aspire to charge for your service or your product, because you've got to get some kinks out of it. And you just take all the feedback, all the reaction and everything as you go along the way, and you improve and you elevate and you reassess and reevaluate what that price looks like every quarter.
Yes.
Once you've got testimonials, results, is everything under your belt. So, I encourage the evolution. I encourage people to let things unfold. It can't all be done and perfect up front.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And when this recording comes out, I'm going to play that little snippet back to you, because the work that you did with that one particular woman, that's it. I mean, you are doing kind of total mindset work and
Thank you.
And a little business therapy on the side. So really, really powerful. So a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
This is recorded in 2021. So when people come back to this, that's the space and time that we're in right now. And I'm wondering, with all that we've learned over the past year and how that's impacted businesses around the globe, how do you see, what is now possible that wasn't possible 2019, 2018, 2017, that actually can benefit LGBTQ business owners in particular? Like, what, if you're looking to a crystal ball, like, what do you see right now telling the future next 5-10 years for our communities?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've been reflecting on food trucks lately and these ghost kitchen concepts, and just thinking about the way that the food industry has evolved through the pandemic and through everything that even before the pandemic. I mean, the food industry was already facing so many challenges, right? Supply, demand, talent, etc. I think about now relative to our communities, right? There's this opportunity to say, you know what, this traditional business in this building, in this office, in this leased commercial space, etc. This can't happen right now, right? Or it won't happen again for a little while until we sort this pandemic out. But there's an opportunity now because everyone's been conditioned to hang out on Zoom, hang out on, Hangouts, FaceTime, whatever, platform, application, etc. People are used to having deep connections and experiences through screens now in a way that was only, really a small subsect of our society. Now it's our entire society is engaging and doing business this way, attending doctor's appointments, funerals, weddings, etc. So there's an opportunity now to jump in. It's not too late, definitely not too late. I would say like right now is the best time. Right now is the best time. Get in, while you fit in before everything, gets ahead of you. And that's the thing is there will always be new opportunities because things will continue to evolve. And you have to trust that as long as you continue to show up, participate in those conversations with other people in your network, in your tribe, etc., you will always be in the know about what's coming up next. You will always know what you need to pivot and be informed. The people that really, truly collapsed, and I say this with all the love in my heart, I got on so many tearful phone calls during 2020 with business owners where I had to deliver some real medicine to them. Like, I know that you want to continue in business. You've got to let go of doing it this way, and we've got to move in this direction. I know it's uncomfortable. I know you're insecure. I know this is, outside of your realm of technology, competency, or whatever, but this is your opportunity now. Are you showing up? Are you ready? Right. And they meet these moments with total fear of the technology processes, industries, etc., because they just haven't networked. They've been working in a silo all by themselves, and they don't have that intel and intelligence and network to lean on as they're making these kinds of pivots. So that's really where we're at now. The bar to entry is much lower. The consumer expectation has completely shifted. And I think there's a huge opportunity for elevating the customer and client experience for online services and businesses. I still think that the best of the best out there, the people are getting all the accolades and recognition, traffic, sign up, sales, etc., they're still coming up short on their customer experience. They're still not leveraging the technology and the tools to their full potential. So there's huge opportunity for someone to come in and eat someone's pie all the way up.
Oh yeah. I liked your phrase, get in where you fit in, right?
Yes.
Kind of like, I mean, we've had a number of guests, advice for the next generation of LGBT entrepreneurs, and it's, have the plan and do it, take that action. And and I can see that I have an appreciation for the work that you're doing for those folks that, in terms of technology, that was, in particular, if you're in the food industry, you have a brick and mortar restaurant where people come in and sit down for your good food. I can see if computer work was not your thing, that could be a big barrier.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. It's again, more of that mindset shift of how can we do what we've always done a little bit differently? And I think that's a good industry to explore, not necessarily to start a business in if that's not your field, but just to kind of see how that has shifted and how that might apply for the kind of the world that you find your business in.
And you have to welcome expertise as well. I think that as entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, small business owners, like, coaches, creators, consultants, we start with one and then we start serving many as we scale. But I think that, especially in the context of capitalism and how much we really over tout self-determinism, I think that we need to get over that, especially as entrepreneurs, especially when you're getting started or even further along. Like, you've just got to let go of everything being on you knowing everything, you doing everything. Invest in other businesses. Let them come up with you. Roll these people up into your success. Let your success be theirs. entrepreneurs. This is how we sustain ourselves, and we can think about even within the LGBTQIA communities, we can create our own microeconomy just investing with our own, if that's what we're committed to, right? Doing things in collaboration, not alone.
Yes, I love that. And so many great communities that are out there, between the NGLCC and all of the chambers of commerce across the United States and now in different countries, start out different kind of Facebook communities, LinkedIn communities. I mean, there's ways to connect with other LGBTQ entrepreneurs, and I love that. I love thinking about what's your biggest problem, and if you have some additional resources to invest in it, delegate. Do what you're good at and delegate so that you can stay focused on what you're good at and continue to perfect that. So I think, Luis, you offer some really good advice there. My last question for you before we round out the interview is just thinking about that next generation, right? Those folks newer to entrepreneurship who are LGBTQ, what advice would you have for them right now just to consider taking that first leap into building the businesses of their dreams?
That's an excellent question. Couple of places to start. I wish I could point to one. I think it needs to be a holistic approach. However, I think one of the first things you need to do is infuse your mind with new ideas. The way that entrepreneurs work is that they constantly evolve. They're always looking to innovate. They're always looking to borrow from other industries for inspiration. We think about what technology is today, this whole concept of like even taking software as a service, for example. You create a tool one time and you make it available to everyone, right? Like that's something that came after the Industrial Revolution. It's inspired by that. It's inspired by the way that cars were manufactured, right? The way that we do software is inspired by a completely separate industry. So I think infusing your mind with new ideas, whether it's books or courses, LinkedIn Learning, or even YouTube. I mean, the knowledge is so accessible now, but really start to welcome new ideas. The second thing is find people who are doing the work that you want to do and let go of this idea of like, you can only be successful if your idea is totally new, totally original, totally innovative. I am so sorry, my friends. The time for innovation ended a long time ago. Right now is a time of reiteration, right? Right now, it's the people who get ahead are the ones who innovate by taking the things that already exist and make them better. That doesn't make you less than. It doesn't mean you won't be successful or you'll be perceived as a sellout or whatever. It's just that there is nothing new. Andy Warhol said that we'd arrive at this point at some point, right? And here we are. Everyone's having their 15 minutes of fame, right? And so I think, letting go of that notion of like, it's got to be original to be successful. You've got to let that go. And then, surround yourself with like-minded people. Think about whether it's following an Instagram account of someone that's doing business the way that you want to do business and getting to know them and their community and being inspired by that. Or, as I mentioned before, look at some of the opportunities now. People are moving beyond offering one-to-one coaching and consulting and services. There are group coaching experiences or group learning experiences that, come in at $27, $49 a month that are more accessible than a $5,000 one-on-one coaching package, but you would still get the same knowledge and frameworks and templates and things to work with. So don't dismiss that you won't have success because you can't afford a certain tier of support. Let yourself grow and get to that point.
Yes. I love that. So I wrote down your 3 things. So expose yourself to new ideas, reiteration, ideas that have worked well. What's your take on it? How do you adapt it? How do you make it better? And that network, mentorship, just staying connected to other folks that inspire you in maybe the spaces that you occupy or different industries altogether.
100%.
Really amazing advice, Luis. I loved our conversation. I feel
know,
like
this is so fun.
Yes.
I'm sad it's over.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. But we're going to connect our listeners to where they can find you online. So please check out the show notes at outentrepreneur.com. Again, I've learned a ton from you today, and your website offers amazing resources and information. So is there any one particular place online outside of your website or maybe your website that you'd love people to go check out like right now?
I actually would like to invite people to the website. I don't want you to get distracted on Instagram with all the puppy videos. If you're really serious about up-leveling your customer experience in your business, I invite you to check out all the free resources on my site. I've got a template library stacked with copy and paste, sales templates and scripts to work with, so you can already start generating what you need to get to that next level and get the help you need.
Yes, it's an awesome website. So highly recommend it. Luis, thanks again for being on the
Thank you,
show.
Rod.
And for everybody tuning in, thank you again for another amazing episode. Details again are at outentrepreneur.com. And as always, keep checking us out every Tuesday morning and keep showing up as authentically as you want at work and in life. And we'll talk again soon. All right, take care.